Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us continue with Surah An-Nisaa bihawlillahi wa quwwatih. We are on ayah number 20. قال الله تعالى وإن أردتم استبدال زوج مكان زوج وآتيتم إحداهن قنطارا فلا تأخذوا منه شيئا أتأخذونه بهتانا وإثما مبينا. You may remember from the last ayah, which was ayah number 19, Allah Jalla wa Ala forbade inheriting women as if they were property, and He also spoke about not mistreating your wives so that they ask for a khula, except if they are guilty of fahisha mubayyana. And He talked about living with them honorably in accordance with reasonable terms, and that you should not hate your wife, because Allah Jalla wa Ala could bring about much goodness in this marriage. So the whole theme was about husband and wife relationship. And this theme in this ayah continues. It's about marriage. He tells us, if you want, and the address is to the men, to make istibdal from badal, meaning to change or exchange. So he says, if you want to change a wife for another wife, the word zawj here means a wife. This is in the context of a man giving a divorce. It is not in the context of the khula, because of course we know in a khula the man takes back the mahar, and so ayah number 19 was speaking about the khula. But in this ayah it is speaking about a divorce. So he's saying, if you want to change one wife to another wife, so you're going to divorce your first wife and you want to marry another woman, then the first wife that you're going to divorce, if you have given them a qintar, which basically means a huge amount of wealth, as the mahar. There is no number assigned to it, it's just a huge amount. Then he says, do not take any of it back. He asks the question, are you going to take it back? Buhtanan. Buhtan in this context means dhulman, out of oppression. It is mansub bil fatha because it is a hal, wa ithman mubina, and out of a clear-cut sin. Ayah 21 follows on. وكيف تأخذونه وقد أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض وأخذنا منكم ميثاقا غليظا. He says, وكيف, how could you take it, meaning take back the mahar, when you have أفضى بعضكم إلى بعض. The verb is أفضى يفضي إفضاء. What this means is to reach something. In this context, in the tafsir, there are two opinions. The first opinion, held by many of the big name mufassirin such as Ibn Abbas and Mujahid and Ibn Qutaybah and As-Suddi and others, is that this means sexual intercourse, because it is when the husband reaches the woman. However, Allah Jalla wa Ala uses ifda as a kinaya, which is one word to mean another word which is linked to it. It is a form of majaz. We find kinayat in other places as well. For example, when he says أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء, or when you have touched women. Touched women means have conjugal relations with your wife. But he does not say it explicitly, because these are matters which people are shy of normally. So upon this ayah, if you have consummated the marriage by having sexual intercourse with your wife, then you're not allowed to take anything of this mahar. It's similar to saying that you pay money to the seller and purchase the product, and then you demand your money back. How can you demand your money back when you have taken the product from the seller? So it's a similar thing here, even though marriage is not exactly a trade, but still it does involve some wealth, which is the mahar. The second opinion on the matter is simply being in privacy with your wife, whilst you both know that you are in each other's privacy. They say from that particular instance, the mahar becomes binding and you're not allowed to take anything of it. They use as evidence a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is weak, but it says, من كشف خمار امرأة ونظر إليها فقد وجب الصداق دخل بها أو لم يدخل بها. Whoever removes the khimar, which is the head covering of the woman, and looks at her, then the sadaq becomes wajib, the mahr, whether he has consummated the marriage or not. But this narration is weak. We do have an authentic narration as a statement of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, who said, إِذَا أَرْخَيْتَ السُّطُورِ وَغَلَّقْتَ الْأَبْوَابِ فَقَدْ وَجَبَ الصَّدَاقِ. If you lower the curtain, meaning the curtain of privacy, وَغَلَّقْتَ الْبَابِ, and you lock the door, so that is to say you're now in a private room with your wife, then the sadaq becomes wajib. So he says that the sadaq becomes wajib from the time of being in privacy with the wife, even before you've consummated the marriage. And he says, وَأَخَذْنَا, this is the noon and niswa, so they have taken, minkum, from you, O men, mithaqan, which means a contract, from wathiqa yathiqu, to trust someone. So mithaq is a contract because you trust the other person. Ghalidha, normally ghalidh means roughness or coarseness. Here it means strong, a strong contract. The marriage contract is a strong contract. It is a contract for life. It is a contract where the woman requires a wali, as opposed to a business contract. There is no wali who is required for the woman. It requires witnesses. It requires for it to be announced. Also, you cannot just dissolve it whenever you want. If a man wants to issue a divorce, he has to do it at the proper time. He cannot do it, for example, when the woman is in her menstrual period, or in a period of purity in which he has had sexual intercourse with her. It needs to be done at the proper time. So there are all these rules and regulations surrounding this contract which tell us that this is not an ordinary contract. It is a strong contract which has much gravity. So reflecting on these two ayatan, we may take that a man can divorce one wife and marry another woman. That is his right. The divorce is exclusively for the man, not for the woman. For the woman, it is a khula'. We can also take that it is permissible to give a huge amount of mahr to the woman because the word qindar is used. However, permissible does not mean it is recommended. What we find from the narrations is that a small amount of mahr is recommended. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَخَفُّ النِّسَاءِ صَدَاقًا أَعْظَمُهُنَّ بَرَكَةً. The women whom you give the least amount of sadaq are the greatest in blessing. So this is what you want to aim for, blessing. That is the name of the game in the marriage. It needs to be blessed, because a marriage could be a blessing or it could be a curse. There is another wording in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad which says, أَعْظَمُ النِّكَاحِ بَرَكَةً أَيْسَرُهُ مَؤُونَةً. The marriage with the greatest blessing is the one which incurs least cost. However, the ayah tells us that if you have given them a large amount, then even if it is a large amount, you're not allowed to take anything of it back. And of course, this is on the condition which the next ayah speaks about, that you have consummated the marriage or you have been in privacy with the wife, depending on which madhab you follow. As for before being in privacy or consummating the marriage, then if you were to divorce them before this, then you can take half of the stipulated mahr, as we discussed in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 237. We also see in ayah 21 the rational nature of argumentation. He justifies the prohibition. How can you take any of this wealth back when you have consummated the marriage with this wife of yours? It's just like the example we gave. How can you demand your money back from the seller when you have taken his merchandise? We take from the ayah that marriage is not something that can be taken lightly, because as Allah explains, it is a mithaqan ghalidha. So you have to respect the rules and regulations and boundaries, because it is not like any other contract. There is much riding on it, both when you are alive, such as rights of the wife and husband on each other, and even after death, which would be inheritance rights. And other than that, such as certain women that you are not allowed to marry, which is what the next ayah is going to speak about. Ayah number 22. وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا مَا نَكَحَ آباؤكم من النساء إلا ما قد سلف إنه كان فاحشة ومقتا وساء سبيلا. He says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا, do not marry what your fathers have married from the women. That is to say, if your father married a particular woman who is not your mother, and then your father died, are you allowed to marry that particular woman who is now a widow? They used to do this in the days of Jahiliyyah until this ayah comes down to abrogate that rule. And it says you're not allowed to marry such a woman ever. It's the same thing with a servant girl as well. If your father had a servant girl and he would have sexual intercourse with her, your father dies and you inherit this servant girl, you are not allowed to have sexual intercourse with this servant girl ever. He says, إِلَّا مَا قَدَ سَلَفَ. Salafa means that which has preceded or that which has passed by, except that which has passed by. So this was before the ayah was revealed. They used to practice this type of marriage. So those Muslims who did this but they have passed away now, they will not be taken into account. But if anyone who is married to the former wife of his father currently has to annul the marriage. He says that this marriage is fahishatan. Fahishatan is mansub al-fatha because it is the jawab of kana. And we talked about what fahish means. It is that which is excessively ugly. Wa maqtan. Maqt means when you excessively hate something. So it is something which is excessively hated. Wa sa'a sabila. Sa'a meaning to be bad or evil. Sabilan, it is an evil way. Sabilan is mansub al-fatha. It is a tamyiz. The verb sa'a, meaning to be bad or to be evil, is a fi'l jamid. It only occurs in the past tense, just like asa and laysa. And sabilan is the tamyiz. So it says, how is it exactly bad? It is bad as a course of action, which is a sabil. Now the verb sa'a can have a present tense, which would be yasu'u, but in this case the word sa'a would mean to grieve somebody. So the meaning slightly changes, and in that case it can have a present tense, as in Surah Al-Isra, لِيَسُوءُ وُجُوهَكُمْ, so that they may disgrace your faces. So the point is that the word sa'a is an interesting word. Depending on the meaning, it could be a fi'l jamid, or it could be a fi'l mutasarrif. That is to say, it can take the present tense. So reflecting on this ayah, the main lesson to take, obviously, is that you are not allowed to marry any woman that your father has married. Whether your father has died or has divorced this woman makes no difference, or whether the marriage ended in a khulu', all of this makes no difference. And it also makes no difference whether your father consummated marriage with this woman or not. The rule is all the same, you're not allowed to marry such a woman ever. And that if such a marriage were to take place, it would have to be annulled immediately. No need for a divorce. The marriage is invalid from the get-go. Okay, what about if your father fornicates with a particular woman? Are you allowed to marry such a woman? The answer is that if this woman repents from her fornication, then you can marry such a woman, because fornication is not the same as marriage, and therefore does not take the same ruling. We also take that if someone commits a sin without having knowledge, then that is not a sin and he is not taken to account for it. Because the ayah tells us that there is no sin on those who entered into this marriage contract before this ayah was revealed, so before they had the knowledge. However, we do need to be careful, because sometimes ignorance is a choice. Sometimes you could be taken to account for not seeking knowledge where you had the ability to seek knowledge. So therefore ignorance would not be an excuse. We may also take that fornicating with near relatives is worse than fornicating with people who are not your relatives, because he says, إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَمَقْتًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Whereas with conventional fornication, he says in Surah Al-Isra, إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. So the word maqtan is not used. So notice the difference. هذا والله أعلم.